Welcome to Let's Talk, Law for Sustainable Cities, a podcast dedicated to cities, law, and environmental sustainability. In each episode, we explore various urban and environmental legal issues. We feature special guests and host our own SACCHI researchers. CLES is part of the South African Research Initiative by the National Research Foundation of South Africa and functions within the Faculty of Law at Northwest University. My name is Lidile Sekwakwa. I am a PhD researcher at CLES and I will be your host for this session. Today, I warmly welcome you to a timely and insightful discussion on how local government in South Africa is evolving, including current challenges and a review of the white paper on local government. South Africa's local government system was one of the most ambitious democratic reforms of the 1994 democratic state. The 1998 white paper on local government outlined a vision for municipalities that would be developmental, democratic, accountable, and capable of delivering services while fostering local economic growth. In the early years, significant progress was made as millions gained access to water, electricity, sanitation, housing, and democratic participation through municipalities. However, over time, many municipalities began to regress due to financial difficulties, weak governance, political instability, corruption, neglect of infrastructure, and a decline in public trust. Today, communities tend to judge the government based on practical issues like whether taps work, roads are maintained, waste is collected, and lights stay on. This is why the review of the white paper is so important. We are pleased to welcome Mr. Gelden Hayes, an expert in municipal planning, infrastructure investment, and public finance. With more than 45 years experience in South Africa and across Africa, he holds qualification in town and regional planning, municipal administration. He is also a registered professional planner and a dedicated member of the South African Planning Institute and the Institute for Local Government Management and the Institute for Asset Management in London. As managing director of BC Gelden Hayes and Associates, he has led or contributed to more than 100 infrastructure investment plans, 30 special development initiatives, and around 45 capital expenditure frameworks. He is recognized as a pioneer in infrastructure investment planning in South Africa. He remains dedicated to advancing integrated methods for capital budgeting, life cycle costing, and sustainable service delivery. Mr. Gelden Hayes has advised major government departments, including the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and the National Treasury, as well as international organizations such as the World Bank. His work focuses on ensuring that infrastructure investments are sustainable and affordable, and on promoting long-term municipal resiliency by developing strategic asset management plans. His key roles include advisory position under the Nigerian Infrastructure Advisory Facility, focusing on the energy sector and urban development reforms. He served as the lead consultant for the Nairobi Services Improvement Project, overseeing 12 integrated urban development plans. He co-authored South Africa's 2006 National Infrastructure Investment Strategy and contributed to COGTA 2000 Infrastructure Investment Planning Guidelines. In 2000, he drafted the first free basic services policy for the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. He developed a capital financing strategies for Tshwane, Mangaung, and Polokwane through a Urban Institute initiative in 2002. With later updates to Tshwane's investment framework in 2006. He also contributed to the World Bank's 2008 economic and sector work on municipal infrastructure and finance, focusing on backlog reduction, borrowing capital, and also policy constraints. Mr. Geldenhuys is also a former academic in urban and regional planning. He remains actively engaged in writing, providing advisory services, and participating in public policy discussion focused on reforming municipal systems through better data, governance, and financial practices. Reading his impressive biography, one cannot help but feel excited about the depth and richness of the conversation ahead. We are truly privileged to have someone of his caliber with us today. Mr. Geldenhuys, thank you for taking the time to join us on Let's Talk. We are honored to host you.
Thank you, Lidile. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm looking forward to the talk. And it's always, hopefully, we can stimulate discussion, thoughts on local government, which is the thing that touches on every citizen's life every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let us now turn to the matter of the day. Mr. Geldenhuys, to begin our conversation and to set the scene, the government has initiated a review of the white paper on local government, suggesting recognition that the current local government system faces serious challenges. My first question is threefold. Why, in your view, has this review become necessary? Secondly, what early warning signs indicated that municipalities were beginning to struggle, and what core weaknesses in the system require urgent attention?
Thank you. I think the important thing is when one assess any document, you got to look at the context in which it was written. Written in 1998, the white paper was written in a period of tremendous optimism immediately after 94, when we turned into a broad-based democracy. And I think one of the assumptions at that time is within this optimism, it was assumed that municipalities would steadily build technical, financial, and institutional capacity. But in reality, municipalities never developed the administrative depth and engineering capability or revenue base required to sustain development, the local government model that we put it in place. I've experienced it in myself. It is in the euphoria of how good things are, is that we started doing models and say, okay, now we're ahead of what local government can do. They'll catch up as they develop. But I think there's a very true saying that say hope is not a strategy. That comes from management doctrine and military. Then we hope that we'll develop municipalities as time proceeded, but it didn't happen. I think one of the issues is that we were largely driven by a rejection of what we had, and then the big ambition of creating something better. The early warning signs, and I think one can go back 15 years ago at least. We started seeing it when we start measuring the performance of local government. Audit outcomes, we're all familiar, and every time it's becoming a little bit worse. Collapsing maintenance budgets, rising consumer debt, increasing dependence on grants, infrastructure backlogs growing faster than delivery, and the steady erosion of technical skills. What was a combination of these factors that led to that many municipalities could not longer maintain existing infrastructure and should have been treated as a national alarm signal. But in this hope environment that we live, we always believe that we can solve it. And I think many of the developments that took place was in trying to readjust the course of the ship, and it created problems. And then the third element, I think that contributed, and what made the review of the white paper necessary, is the core structural weaknesses in the mismatch between funding functions of municipalities and institutional capacity. Constitutionally, municipalities are part of three spheres of government. Technically, they've got to look after themselves. But I think with the pressure on local government, we had a continuous situation where national government, in particular National Treasury, COGTA, and other sector departments start prescribing, starting to tell municipalities what to do to improve the situation. And municipalities were expected to become highly developmental institutions while simultaneously carrying extensive unfunded mandates. And I think that is one of the challenges. Local government is the apex government. That's the one that's closest to the people, that got to deliver on the ground. And if you want to deliver on the ground, you've got to work through local government, irrespective of which national or provincial department you're on. I think in the process, a lot of responsibilities were transferred to local government in the so-called phenomenon of unfunded mandates, where they had to execute certain things, or certain things were executed on their behalf, but at the end of the day, they end up with their obligations. And in the process, I think that the pressure, there was so much pressure and emphasis placed on process compliance and too little on operational competence, infrastructure, sustainability, and economic growth. So it's not a sudden collapse that we see. It's something that came a long time, I think, inherently in the structures and processes that we implemented in local government.
Mr. Geldenhuys, building on that perspective and turning to the present realities facing municipalities today, if we look at municipalities today, what would you identify as the 2 or 3 most urgent practical challenges that prevent municipalities from delivering reliable services to communities?
Okay, I think it's quite clear. The first one, obviously, and it stands out, is financial deterioration. The deterioration in financial position of municipalities. Many municipalities are no longer generating sufficient cash from their own revenue base to maintain infrastructure properly. Rising consumer debt, electricity trading pressures. For example, a simple thing that we see is with the rise in the cost of bulk electricity, is that the margins of municipalities where electricity was a service, where they generated quite large surpluses to fund other activities, that simply the cost of bulk electricity is starting exceeding 70+% of the total expenditure. There's no margins. With that comes water losses. That is something that's quite on the forefront currently in local government. And then weak collection rates linked to institutional challenges, and which is weakening financial finances. So I think financial deterioration is the factor that is bleeding municipalities dead. And also, if one starts looking at solutions, it will be something that's primarily looking at stemming this financial deterioration, stabilizing it. I think linked to that also is your institutional and technical collapse, and it's something that's happened through again, not a single factor, but a whole series of events over the last 20+ years. And many municipalities has lost experienced engineers, planners, project managers, financial specialists, and operational staff. And I think part of the system, the challenges is that we've got very young, brilliant people that came into local government, but I think they haven't had the benefit of working in, for example, a proper mentoring system that could pull them through the system and bring them to being effective and efficient. So it's a system issue that one's got to look at. And I think reviewing the white paper, it's all about the municipal system and how we deal with it. And very often what happens, or what has happened, is that we've gone into a very, very strong compliance-driven system. You must have a SDF. Every municipality must have a spatial development framework. Whether it's good or bad, or whether it fulfills the purpose, is not important. The law says you must have one. And that kind of compliance has actually diverted the attention from the consequences. What we're doing, very interesting American engineer and management theorist, Edward Deming. He said the system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. So what we're getting today is by design, and I think there's a lot of arguments to be made, is that a lot of the challenges that we have in local government is by design and the way that we implement it. And then obviously one of the things that we'll see much more of in the immediate future with the upcoming local government elections, and I think in the next cycle of local government governance, is political instability and administrative interference. There's continuous interference, political interference in municipalities. I think simply if you look at the Structures and System Act's requirements, there are many more options for municipalities to exercise than simply an executive mayor. But by default, we adopted the executive mayor function, which implies political control over the total municipality, right down to the administrative and executive levels as well. And linked to that with the changing political environment is the instability that coalition governments brought to the scene, which create a lot of instability. And I think that is one aspect that was recognized in the review, or is being recognized, is the how to stabilize the political situation. And I think one of the things that we'll see with parties announcing their mayoral candidates for the election is that politics is concerned with the immediate advantage. The focus now on winning the elections. But on a philosophical level, statesmanship is with what is good and permanent. And I think that is the ability to look long term within the political turmoil. So it's a financial deterioration, the institutional and technical collapse, and then the political instability. And I think we should recognize political interference in the day-to-day administrations of municipalities, which is a challenge. Thanks, sir.
Those are clearly serious and pressing challenges. And it brings me to the next question. Many residents experience failures in water supply, electricity, roads, sanitation, and waste removal on a daily basis. In practical terms, what needs to change within municipalities for these basic services to function consistently and effectively again?
Yeah, I think the important thing, when we started off with service delivery, and our whole system was driven by service delivery, especially after 1994, based on the Reconstruction and Development Program, the RDP, is that we kicked off and say we've got to provide people with access to basic services. And basic services at that point in time was very much designed as what is the minimum necessary to provide people with the opportunity to have a clean and healthy life. And that is why limited water within 6 kiloliters, within 200 meters, etc., etc. But basic services is really at the basic level. But I think over time, some policy creep caused, for example, that we're providing services way above the basic levels as initially defined. Currently, in terms of Department of Water and Sanitation regulation, basic services is a yard connection in terms of water and waterborne sanitation. Now, simply in terms of that increases the consumption of water of a household from, say, around 2-3 kiloliters per month to 12-15 kiloliters per month. And I think that creates financial problems and in the system where people receive services they cannot pay for. And that manifests in our high debtors levels, the kind of debt that municipalities must write off, but also infrastructure management. And I think the priority must shift from announcing new projects to maintaining and rehabilitating existing projects. But again, being in an election cycle, and I think you can read the papers and look at the news every day, it's announcement about new projects. We've got a new projects. It's nice to cut ribbons at a new project, and the essence is that we, if we look at the financial reporting of local authorities, that we consume more of our infrastructure than what we maintain and replace, and that is a downward cycle we have to break. One of the big pressures I think that we haven't come to grip with, and that is part of the whole system is our rate of urbanization. Now, urbanization largely takes place on the expectation of a better future in our cities, and we feel that by guaranteeing people basic service. So if you come, whether you've got a job or not, and you attach yourself to a city, a town in South Africa, government policy is we'll provide you with services whether you can pay for it or not. And that creates an instability. And I think we create the impetus for accelerated urbanization by looking at these issues from a perspective of increasing the supply, irrespective of what the conditions on the ground are. And I think there one's got to look at the constitutional provisions which say municipalities must do these things, but within their financial and administrative capacity. You cannot force a municipality to exceed its capacity, its financial and administrative capacity. But I think that happened over the past 20 plus years, is that with that push on providing more and more and more. Financial realism, I think it's a very important thing that we got to look at to improve the situation. Municipalities cannot continue expanding service obligations without understanding long-term operational and maintenance cost. We've got an emphasis in our system on capital expenditure, capital projects. We know December last year, National Treasury threatened to take away municipalities' grant allocations because they haven't spent their capital budgets. But every infrastructure decision must be linked to affordability, asset management, long-term financial sustainability. Even if we get to contentious things and you in a center that in the law faculty of a university, basic human rights, even if we say water is a basic human right and housing is a basic human right that we got to look at, there's a caveat to that. We must work towards that. It's not an obligation on local government to provide those things outside the capacity. And I think it's moving outside the realism of our financial and institutional capacity that has caused a lot of the issues. And then I think the third issue to improve the basic services position again as technical administration must rebuild and partially insulated from political instability. We spoke about that. Water electricity systems, water electricity networks are complicated systems to operate, and we've got to look at the technical experience leadership to manage them. And I think in that sense, we also got to look at how we provide these services. We talk a lot about it's a government function. I've just said that constitutionally we're obliged to do that. But also that we talk about PPP, public-private partnerships involving the private sector. But it just sprung to mind when I was thinking about these things is we've got one water service provider in a town. That's the municipal council. But we've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fiber companies providing services. Just as a thought, why cannot we proliferate water services providers in a municipality? It's a question. So we've got to be innovative around these things that we're looking at.
Thank you so much for that answer, rather. And when service delivery repeatedly breaks down, communities often point to weak governance. They point out to poor accountability and corruption. In your view, why have these problems become so entrenched, and what practical accountability measures could help restore public confidence?
Yeah, I think the key is corruption become entrenched partly because municipalities involved into these major centers of procurement and patronage while institutional oversight weakened. We were forced through our procurement legislation to do things in a certain way, which I think created, and now our experience has shown, a huge and fertile environment for corruption. Large infrastructure budgets combined with weak technical scrutiny create opportunities for abuse. So at the end of the day, it's around the capability. It's around basic law and order. But I think also maybe sitting back and thinking the way in which we do things, doesn't that create the opportunity for all things untoward to happen in the process? I think accountability is weakened because the systems increasingly reward procedural compliance rather than measurable outcomes. So if we comply, if we work through terms of reference and of a project and we tick all the boxes, it's fine, we've done our job. We get a little audit tick and say, well done, irrespective of the outcomes of that. And that's something that we'll have to look at. Municipalities can often demonstrate compliance with reporting requirements while actual service delivery continues to deteriorate. And I think we see that every day. And I think confidence in the system is very important, and confidence will only return if consequence management become visible and credible. If there's no consequence for the state of affairs and the state of management, and there's no sanction on anybody, why will it change? And I think to build confidence, there must be consequences in officials, whoever, in consultants, whoever is part of this process not performing. But I practically see very few consequences in the day-to-day operations of service delivery. It means professionalizing senior appointments, and I think there's a lot about professionalizing government service, and it simply have competent people in the job, and they have a measure of competency that we have, and then in the process also protecting technical administration from political interference. We come back to that, enforcing accountability in procurement, strengthening audit follow-throughs. What is the consequence for municipality if there's a lot of audit findings from the Auditor General? We had 20 audits in the past with 20 audits giving findings, all these negative things, but nothing has happened. What's the consequence of that? And I think building trust in the system, it's a very long process. It's not compliance, but it's the citizen of a city trusting the municipality that what comes out of it is done properly. And then there's an old Dutch proverb, I think, that says that trust arrives on foot. It comes in very slowly, but it leaves on horseback. You can break trust very quickly. And I think the trust breakdown between citizens and institutions at this time is quite an issue. And we'll have to work on that, because if that trust isn't restored, we find that people start circumventing processes, laws to sustain or to survive. And that is where we see increase in formality and everything that goes with that.
Okay, thank you so much. And from what you have seen so far, do the current review discussions and recommendations address the root causes of municipal failure, or is there still a risk that some of the deeper structural issues are being avoided?
Yeah, I think that the one positive, or one of the very positive things about the white paper is that it recognizes the strain under which the system is. It's accurate in the issues that it identifies, but I think there's still a reluctance to confront some of the deeper structural realities. There remains a tendency to assume that the problem is mainly governance failure, rather than acknowledging that we've got a structural design weakness in the system. And it's easy to blame it on governance. If we battle elections, we say we will introduce better governance, but I think the sad reality is that we've got a structural problem in local government, and as I said earlier, the system delivers what it's been designed for. So it was, how can I put it? It was, to some extent, there's design flaws that causes it to fail. And I think if we look at the review of the process as and I think Albert Einstein said that you cannot solve a problem using the same thinking that created it. And that's maybe one critique against the draft white paper on the table, is that it's very much the same old thinking, and there's very little about breaking the mold and see if we really can do things better. The difficult question is whether all municipalities are financially viable in their current form. Now, there's one thing being financially viable, and the other thing is having the financial situation we have currently through things like mismanagement, corruption, and everything we talk about, whether all functions should remain assigned at local level, and whether the developmental state mandate become too broad relative to institutional capacity. I think municipalities do have an overload. One thing that we haven't spoke about yet this morning is the one-size-fits-all type of approach, whether it's Johannesburg or small little rural municipality in the Eastern Cape, you judge by exactly the same, or have to comply to the same regulations. And I think issues like traditional leadership, which is not appropriately accommodated in our system, and even in the proposals in the white paper, it's a whole principle of form follows function, that somehow we'll have to find a way to break up and respond to local issues through in the structures that we develop to run or manage and administrate that areas. I think that is very important. I don't always see that coming through in the draft white paper. The recognition of the two-tier local level, or the two-level district and local municipalities over the same geographical jurisdiction, I think that's being recognized, and it's going to disappear. The key question is, where does it go? Does local government disappear and we end up with 44 district municipalities, or do we get rid of the district municipalities and have our 257 local municipalities? That's a fundamental thing, and we're not certain how it's going to pan out. Also, the focus on economic growth is not sufficient, and it remains this foundation of sustainable municipalities. Municipal finance ultimately depends on functioning local economies. Productive infrastructure and expanding tax bases is a function of how well the economy goes. And I think without economic growth, we're going to see municipalities simply continue to decline. You cannot redistribute wealth that you haven't created. We must create wealth, and that is way beyond the mandate of local government. It's a national structural issue that needs to be addressed.
Based on what you have highlighted, and my question would be, if the government were serious about turning municipalities around within the next 3 to 5 years, what immediate reforms, leadership decisions, and political commitments would need to happen now to place local government on a more sustainable path?
I think sustainability starts with the stabilization of local government. It's that old saying, we must stop the bleeding, and we must stabilize it. Now, stabilizing a system, it's difficult because we're in a continuous change situation. Government needs to identify strategically important municipalities, and there are in many of our policies a recognition of adopting approaches based on the capabilities, the capacity, the potential of areas, and investing accordingly. And we must focus aggressively on restoring financial discipline. It's not something to be negotiated. Financial discipline will imply very hardcore interventions in terms of payment, credit control, but also designing our systems in such a way that you respond to poverty, that you don't dump people into perpetual poverty by burdening them with something they didn't choose and they cannot pay for. And I think that's part of the root causes of our financial challenges, and which we have to stabilize: technical capability, infrastructure, maintenance. And I think the key thing is that we should turn all our attention to maintenance, asset renewals before we start expanding infrastructure. We can only expand infrastructure if there is a cost recovery involved in that, to the extent that it is financially sustainable. We cannot afford, by continuously expanding the infrastructure footprint, the city footprint, and just creating liabilities. And it's a sad reality, and somehow we'll have to build the confidence in our communities that they see what is necessary. The flip side of that coin is that if you not able to contain these things and make it better, as that we'll just see an explosion in informality. People got to survive, and if government cannot respond to their needs, you take the informal route, you circumvent, you bypass legislation, and that is what people are doing. It's a survival strategy. The second one is the rebuilding of professional administration. I think we spoke a lot about that. It's absolutely necessary. The third is regulatory simplification. We've got an immensely complicated municipal regulatory system. And what happens is a system that evolved since 1994 up to this day. And every time, with all sector departments have some stake in local government, we find new policies coming out, new regulations. Eventually you find cross lines between regulatory requirements, which creates complete confusion and pressure on local government. And I think maybe more important than reviewing a white paper on local government is a cleansing of the regulatory environment. It's absolutely critical. And I think we've proved through the increase in regulations imposed on local government, there's none of them, not a single one of them, has actually contributed to better service delivery and municipal management. I think that is a very, very, very important thing. Somebody once said that perfection is achieved not by when there's nothing more to add, but rather when there's nothing left to take away. So we got to strip it out and see what's left. That's absolutely necessary, but I think this is one of the killing factors in local government.
To bring our conversation to an end, my final question to you, Mr. Geldenhuys, is that, in your view, if these reforms are not implemented and the current trajectory continues, what do you realistically expect local government in South Africa to look like over the next 5 years, and what would that mean for ordinary citizens?
Well, I think if we cannot arrest the decline, if we cannot stop the bleeding, we're likely to see increasing unevenness across the country. We will find a smaller number of economically functional municipalities that might be stabilized, while many others will continue to experience declining infrastructure reliability and financial stress and institutional fragility. The response from citizens will be to increasingly seek alternatives outside the municipal system. We see that on a daily basis. Private security, borehole, solar energy, private waste removal, gated communities, informality that explodes, and that is how people cope. That creates a fragmented urban system where service quality depends increasingly on personal affordability rather than municipal capability. So you look after yourself, and the emergence of self-reliance in communities, I think, will explode. And it's a coping mechanism, and maybe it's not all negative, but it's simply an indication that we're stifling the ability of communities to look after themselves, and they eventually will look after themselves. The greatest long-term risk is not only infrastructure collapse, but I think a gradual erosion of public trust in the state itself, and that's a very, very shaky ground if we moved into that realm where people simply don't trust the state. They don't trust the their municipality. They don't trust government, and then we start creating the breeding ground for social unrest. Once committees lose confidence that municipalities can reliably provide basic services, social cohesion, economic confidence will deteriorate, and that's a serious situation. So it's nice to talk about these things, but I think the ability and institutions like CLES and so on, and the research that they're doing is actually focusing on these things and see what's happening in our communities and gauge the temperature on the ground. But the fact of the matter is there needs to be a turnaround, and maybe the turnaround might not come as intended by the policymakers or the legislators and so on. But the fact of the matter is there's an incredible instinct and a capability in communities to survive, irrespective of deteriorating services, lack of confidence in government. But maybe to conclude on a positive level, I think we've proved in South Africa that we can overcome these things. And the question is just simple: how far are we before we make the turnaround and so on? And I believe we can do that turnaround. We've got enough skills, we've got enough resources in this country to do it. But that is how I view it. Thank you so much, Lidile.
That brings us to the end of our conversation. Mr. Geldenhuys, thank you again for sharing your valuable time, experience, and insights with us today. This has been a truly enriching conversation. You have helped us reflect on the root causes of institutional decline, the pressing service delivery challenges communities face, and also the critical opportunity presented by the review of the white paper on local government. Most importantly, you have reminded us that fixing local government is not optional. It is important for restoring dignity, trust, and development in the lives of South Africans. To our audience, thank you for joining us for this important episode of GLES Talk, Law for Sustainable Cities. Be sure to look out for more GLES Talk episodes and also other exciting GLES events coming out soon. And also follow us across all our social media platforms. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and engage with us as we continue to build meaningful conversation that matter. Until next time, goodbye and stay engaged.